Okay, Edith, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Edith C. I'm with the Early Childhood Special Education. I will begin with the presentation talking about the whole continuum of the support for the special education department. In Dallas ISD, there is a continuum of special ed support available to students who meet special education eligibility. The decisions of the what, where, and how of the support will be determined by the art committee through the IEP meeting. So on the left side of this continuum shows that there are two types of support that could be served in the general education mainstream setting: external support and in-class support. If the student requires additional or intensive support in order to meet his or her educational needs, the art committee can consider the specialized support served in the specialized setting, which is on the right-hand side of the slide. Next, please. So I will begin to go a little bit details about ECSE, which is Early Childhood Special Education. Next, please. So just like what Jeanette said, like, we are not a new program. We are formerly known as PPCD. So we are a federal and state mandated program under IDEA Part B for children 3 to 5 years old with disability. One of the reasons that they emphasize kind of changing the terminology is to emphasize that we are not a classroom type, we are more a service. So all the eligible students will be receive ECSE services in a variety of settings, such as in pre-K classroom, resource, or self-contained classroom, or sometimes could be in the community setting, such as in Head Start or preschool. And the location of the service will be determined by the art community based on the least restricted environment. What that means is that the student should be always educated with his or her peers in the general education to the maximum extent that is appropriate. Next, please. This slide talks about the continuums within the ECSE services. Although we have two physical types of the ECSE classroom, the collaborative and the self-contained, the eligible student can be served in any setting on this continuum that is appropriate and based on the student's IEP. So with that saying, when any student that in the pre-K3, pre-K4, or kinder age students, they do not have to be just being served in the collab or the self-contained classroom. You know, it's really based on the students, the IEP, to determine where the service can be provided. Next, please. Our curriculum is pre-K guidelines and the kinder TEAS, which is the same as the general education program. But for us, we will with some accommodation and or modification according to the student's IEP. And also you will see the instructional interventions and strategies, just such as discrete trial, visual support, functional routine, and structural environment, which helps supporting our student learning and achievement. Next, please. On the left side, there is the frosted curriculum selected by the district for pre-K3 and pre-K4 grade levels. This frosted curriculum set is aligned with the pre-K guideline that is pretty much like the T standard for the pre-K age group that is determined by the TEA. So on the right-hand side, you will see a snapshot of the kinder TEAS, which is the curriculum for the 5 years old kindergarten students. So our program are not using anything different from the general education program. We are using the same curriculum that is based on the TEA, but with the student's IEP and the individual needs, we might provide additional accommodation or modification to the curriculum to meet the IEP expectation. Next, please. One of the key program components is to provide a structured environment for our students. So as you can see, you know, we want to make sure that we provide a visually clear and organized in their learning environment. So everything should be labeled with words and picture to provide a print-rich environment to our students. And then also, in order for us to help a student to build a structured and predictable routine, we'll be providing schedule and visual support to help them to comprehend their environment. Next, please. And other important program components for ECSE include classroom management and documentation. So besides working on the academic achievement, we also focus on other critical skills such as like social emotional, communication, and self-management through the use of the evidence-based practices and intervention. So like there will be a lot of like individualized practices or like small group instruction happening in our ECSE program and services. And our staff will be collecting documentation to make sure that like based on the data, we can provide, to drive our decision making on the students' learning. So that's pretty much a very high level overview of the ECSE program. And do we have any question about ECSE?
Edith, we're going to go ahead and wait for questions to the very end. Is that okay?
Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, and Ms. Jamie Utrera.
Sure. Good morning. I'm Jamie Utrera, and I am the supervisor for Inclusion and Resource Programs. I'm ready for the next slide. In inclusion, we really, the majority of our students across the district that receive special education services are serviced within the inclusion or gen ed classroom. So that means there is a second teacher that is identified to come in and help support students during their gen ed time. So they may be paired. In this slide here, actually, we're looking at the gen ed option as well as external and in-class support. So the difference between those two is external support means that the special education teacher and the gen ed teacher would be collaborating outside of class time. And in-class support means that that special education teacher would be coming into that classroom for the students to level that playing field during the regular class time. I'm ready for the next slide. So within that gen ed setting, our students are offered the option for accommodations. Accommodations are those things that are available to any student actually. So don't necessarily need to have a disability in order to receive an accommodation. One example would be if a student is forgetting their glasses every day and needed to sit closer to the board, the teacher then could just adjust where the student is sitting. So that's just one small example of an accommodation. All right, I'm ready for the next slide. We also, within that gen ed classroom, can consider a modified curriculum. So that means that a student is in that gen ed classroom. They may be functioning 2 to 3 grade levels below their gen ed peers, but they can still be provided services in a way to level that playing field. So they may be pulled out to be provided support in a separate location. All right, I'm ready for the next slide. So now the next few slides, we're actually going to think about how the inclusion classroom might be set up to change up the feel of that gen ed classroom for these students. So these are just the recommended approaches that we've suggested to our teachers to help with that inclusive practice. I'm ready for the next slide. Here's an example of station teaching where you have both teachers in the classroom and they're each with small group. And each of them are leading a station, so they may be teaching slightly different materials within those stations. I'm ready for the next slide. Here's an example of parallel teaching. So both teachers are in that same classroom, but they've divided the class into half. Both are teaching the same content at the same time. I'm ready for the next slide. All right, and then we have alternative teaching. So this is where one teacher reviews instruction with the majority of the class while the other works in a small group to provide pre-teaching or reteaching or review for some of those smaller group students. I'm ready for the next slide. All right, and teaming is when both teachers share the delivery of the same content. So both teachers are in the whole class and they share the instructional piece. So they just take turns in speaking with the group. It's kind of an example of what we're doing with you today. I'm ready for the next slide. All right, and one teach, one observe. This is a time where we might ask teachers to just kind of be sure that students are seated in a way that is appropriate for them, so we can consider maybe some alternative ideas of how we might move students around to make the room more functional. But one teach, one observe is not often, it's one of those things that we don't use very often within the district. I'm ready for the next slide. All right, and one teach, one assist. This would mean that the other teacher is walking around and actually assisting individual students while one teacher is providing that direct instruction. All right, next slide. All right, and when we talked about the inclusive practice, we did speak a little bit on one of the slides about that modified curriculum. These are just a few examples of some of the materials that might be brought in to assist with that modified curriculum or those intervention priorities for these students. All right, that is it for me.
Okay, and now we have Ms. Daniels and Ms. Harris from the Behavior Program.
Good morning, I'm Jimenelle Harris, and I am the behavior itinerant for the Central Network, and I'm going to go over the behavior program with you. Next slide. We have the redirection classroom, and that is that's our short-term classroom where our kids are, we want them to be fully included in the classroom, and if they need to be pulled back for social skills instruction, that's where we pull them back for social skills instruction in our redirection classroom. And again, it's a short-term intervention, and not all redirection classrooms are on campus, so we have specific campus that they're on. So once they have mastered their goals, they go back to their home campus. Next slide. And next we have the Wraparound Intervention Network. That is for our most severe students that are having severe behavior issues. They usually have a medical diagnosis that is going to warrant for them to go to the wraparound intervention. They've been in the hospital for a number of times. And so we stabilize behavior here. And that is a self-contained setting. And once the behavior is stabilized, we transition the kids back to their, maybe we'll transition them to a redirection classroom or back to their home school, whichever the documentation shows. Next slide. And our continuum of service for our behavior program is mainstream. Our kids can be fully mainstream in the classroom, in the inclusion classroom, and just minimal support or pull back. We do have the option of resource where they can come and receive some of their services in the redirection classroom or in class support with our redirection teacher. And if the behavior warrants and they're not able to maintain in the general ed classroom, you can self-contain not only for our wraparound intervention, but also for our redirection classroom. Next slide. How do we get to a behavior classroom? That is a question many ask. Sometimes we have transfers in from out of district, and if the student was in a redirection or a behavior adjustment program, in a previous district, they will qualify to go to our redirection classroom. Many times we have initials and reevaluations, and once the initials and reevaluations have been completed, the student may need to receive service in a redirection classroom. Also, we have current special ed inclusion students that may be receiving all of their instruction in the general ed classroom, but however, they're having behavior issues. And we have a process where the students will, our staff will come out, observe the student, and we will speak with the staff and give recommendations and interventions. And if those don't work, then maybe the student needs to receive instruction in our redirection classroom. So that's how they transition into the redirection or WIN classroom. Next slide. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And now we have Ms. Barbara Strom.
Good morning. My name is Barbara Strom. I'm an itinerant teacher for specialized programs. I serve portions of the Central and Southwest networks. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So the programs we work with are the activities of daily living, otherwise known as ADL, functional living skills, which we call FLS, and the total communication and autism classrooms, which you'll typically hear referred to as TC. Next slide. So we have, just like everyone else, our program standards and expectations. These are what drive our classrooms, and the expectations are across the board for all three of the programs that we work with. Federal law keeps us in line, and we make sure that our teachers are abiding by all expectations set out for the district. Next slide. All of our classrooms follow something, we just call it rigor, but it refers to the routine, the interactions, the activities, the grade activities, ongoing assessment, and how the room is arranged. And we're just trying to make sure that our students are getting the best support with evidence-based practices. Next slide. Again, just piggybacking on the evidence-based practices, some of the different types of things that are used to collect data, discrete trial training, positive behavior supports, just various, again, evidence-based practices we use with the students to collect data and documentation. The room, we work with our teachers on having the rooms set up in specific ways to work specifically with the students on various targeted behaviors. Next slide. Again, like many of the programs, definitely like ECSE, our students use schedules, and we spend a lot of time in all classrooms working on communication to make sure that the students are able to not only understand and receive, but also express communication. Next slide. Again, lots of documentation happening. We're looking at how students' behavior is reinforced, how we can help to develop appropriate behaviors with the students. Everything there's an expectation that all data is collected and that is maintained. You should be receiving information with report cards as far as how the students are doing with the objectives they're working on. That, again, is something that the teachers are maintaining in the classroom and will share with you. Next slide. Just different things that you might see in the classroom, schedules, individualized workstations, not so many group activities anymore because of our social distancing, but in the past, lots of small group, large group activities. Again, the teachers are working really hard to practice social distancing at this time. Next slide. Just some examples of different schedules that our students are using in the classrooms. Again, schedules are based on the needs of the students. Next slide. And just some various things that, expectations that all of our classrooms must have: organization, structure, the schedules. The teachers are following schedules, there's classroom schedules, student schedules. Everyone's working on communication. That should be going with families as well. So making sure that you have ongoing communication with the teacher is critical for us. Make sure that documentation is happening so you know how your student is progressing with goals and objectives, and then activities are based on those goals and objectives. And that is specialized programs.
Thank you. And now we have Ms. Ellis with Homebound.
Okay, good morning. My name is Chloe Ellis. I'm the program supervisor for Hospital Homebound. Next slide. This slide kind of reviews Homebound eligibility. So we base our eligibility based on TEA recommendations. Homebound offers instruction to general ed and special ed students with non-contagious illnesses and other medical conditions. The following criteria must be met for students to be eligible. The student is expected to be confined at home or hospital bedside for a minimum of 4 weeks. However, the weeks do not have to be consecutive. The student is confined at home or hospital bedside for medical reasons only. The student's medical condition is documented by a physician or psychiatrist licensed to practice in the United States. Next slide. So on this slide, I kind of have a flow chart in regards to the process, the application process. So in order to request an application packet, you need to contact the campus nurse or Section 504 at the student's enrolled campus. From that, you will need to complete the packet, and once it's completed, you return it to the campus nurse. The campus nurse will send it to our Homebound help desk for processing. Once again, determination is based on eligibility requirements. So if a student is not eligible based on those 3 criteria, I will review the file. I will review it with the Homebound intake coordinator. We will process it, and then I will make recommendations based on communication and correspondence I have with other district personnel as far as other means or best way that we can better serve the student if the student's not eligible for Homebound services. If the student is approved, a Homebound teacher is assigned, the campus nurse and the Section 504 R committee members receive that communication via email from the help desk. And then from there, an ARD or 504 meeting will be held to do a change of placement, and the Homebound teacher will schedule a meeting with a parent or guardian to determine the instructional arrangement and when services will start for that student. As the ending date approaches, the physician's referral will be reevaluated. At that point, there will either be a clearance that will be provided by the physician, or they can complete an extension form to continue those services after the recommendation start and end date has expired. Extended placement will continue. We will just need a copy of the extension form. If they're being released from Homebound, there will be another ARD or 504 committee meeting that will be held at the campus to place the student back on the campus to help them transition back. And then at that point, they are dismissed from Homebound services. So every year, just be mindful that students do not roll over from year to year. Every year, there needs to be new documentation that's submitted, a new Homebound packet, and then the process starts over again every single year. If you have additional questions, like I said, we have a help desk. That email is homebound@dallasisd.org. Miss Angela Walker, she's our Homebound intake coordinator. If you have additional questions, feel free to reach out to her. You can go to the SPED website. We do have a web page on there regarding hospital homebound with all the required information, and also contact information for staff. And that's all that I have. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Ms. Jocelyn Harmon.
Hello, my name is Jocelyn Harmon, and I'm the Transition Services Supervisor for Dallas ISD. Next slide. Okay, so in transition, we help the student to transition to life after high school. So when we do that, we do assessments at the beginning to figure out what the student wants to do once they graduate. If they don't know what they want to do, we use those assessments to kind of guide them into showing them what they're good at. And then we try to tailor their course of study according to what they want to do, give them opportunities for work experience on and off the campus, and then also college trips and career exposure. Some of the programs that we have in transition services are the 18+ classrooms. Within Dallas, we have 6 18+ classrooms across the district, and these are classes for those students that have completed all of their state requirements, state and district requirements, but just have returned to school to work on vocational skills. So they don't have a typical bell-to-bell schedule. They don't get transcripted grades because they already have the grades and credits that they need, and they do different things that will help them transition into life after high school. So job skills, they may go off the campus. Some of them are interning where they don't even report to school, they report right to a job, but we kind of monitor them and job coach them on those jobs. So we have those 6 classrooms. We also have one district program where they do a lot more. So sometimes our campus programs will filter into that district program. We also have work-based learning. Again, work-based learning can be on campus or off campus. Some of the opportunities now during COVID are as available because of COVID. So a lot of our work-based learning will be on campus this year, but I've charged this staff with creating business enterprises. So we've had some schools across the district that have had spirit stores where they've sold spirit items to the rest of the school, and it's ran strictly by the special ed department and the students, where they're exchanging money, you know, being a cashier, arranging the setup, doing all different types of things, marketing, all those things. We had one school with a coffee shop. Some other schools were like popcorn shops. Some of the students work in a DECA store. So those are some of the things that are on campus. Some of the businesses that we work with off campus are CC's Pizza, our own central kitchen within Dallas ISD, some movie theaters, some grocery stores like Trader Joe's, different places. It's just geared towards what the student wants to do. We also have a vocational adjustment class, which is VAC. These are for those students that we actually find jobs for, but they may still have credits that they need to finish. So they'll go to school and maybe have an early release to go to work. And then we visit them on their jobs sometimes to see how things are going. So we'll find them jobs, or some of the students already have jobs, but we still kind of give them support on their jobs, and they can get an early release or a late start to go to work. We have the EPIC program, which is enrichment program for inspiring children. And this program just gave the special education students an opportunity to have some extracurricular activities or after school programs. A lot of the times our students aren't geared towards sports or may not be able to do chess or checkers or whatever it may be. The EPIC program provided them with things like no heat cooking, Zumba, fine arts, just different programs that they can do after school. And we have that at some of the high school campuses, at middle school campuses, and last year was our first year putting it on an elementary school campus. And with that program, we partnered with Ability Connection, and they actually brought the curriculum and the programs in, and we had Dallas ISD staff there to support. And then we also have a program called Focus, so Functional Occupational Careers for Unique Students, and that's more geared towards our 18+ students, and it is an internship program. Similar to Project Search, if you've ever heard of Project Search, where the students intern at a job, and then they cycle through 3 different areas, and then at the end of that program, usually they get hired. So we've been using our own internal placements with the central kitchen or custodial services or different departments within Dallas ISD, and the students rotate between those different I guess, job areas or skills within that department. And we've had several of our students get hired in the central kitchen where they're working at some of the schools and the cafeterias, and they're getting paid. And some of our students have gotten hired at the VA hospital. So that program has been very successful for us. I'm trying to go to the next page. Can you go to the next page? Who and what for transition? So students get transition plans if they have autism starting at age 3. It's not a full out transition plan, but we do start prepping that student for life after high school. So we do that from age 3 to 12. For all other students, they don't start getting a transition plan until age 13. And they get it the whole time they're here at school. So for students with disability, students with autism, the law says we have to start planning earlier. So that's why we plan at age 3 to 12. And then at 13, everybody gets a transition plan. I've put a QR code here, and it is for the state's transition website, and it has everything that you need for transition. On that QR code or on that website, they have something called the Texas Employment Guide on there. You can go into that guide. It has timelines and different things on there that tells you what the school should be doing at a certain age, what the parents should be doing, what the students should be doing. It has something about relevant state agencies, guardianship, that's usually a hot topic, Social Security, just different things. So it's a good guide to kind of get you focused on transition and assisting your child, but also to help you maybe ask questions during the art or of your teachers as it relates to transition planning. So that QR code is there. Next slide. And I think that's it.